Things I thought it was a little ugly offensively in the first half. That being said, it's hard to tell where some of those runs go when you're blowing it dead. We were being dreadfully simple and running inside zone and between the tackles, and then you get tagged off and they blow it down. And I wouldn't have wanted to be an official and decide where to spot a lot of those, but it's hard to get a real read from that.
Dave, are we the only team in the country that the coach has an issue with the officials at the spring game? I mean,
Darn Big Ten.
Maybe, I don't know.
We set up the rules.
I know. I did watch the first half relatively closely, and it was hard to watch. Maybe it was better in person. I did listen to you guys' rapid reaction, and it sounds like it was even hard to kind of follow along too. Obviously, from a scoring perspective, you're trying to figure out who's scoring points, why they're scoring points, who's down, why they're down, because if they got touched, it was like by a fingernail. And all of that said, like the offense did struggle a little bit out of the gate there. I think, Casey Thompson goes 3 or 4 for maybe 31 yards, maybe a few scrambles, but I think kind of like, 3 and outs or whatnot was the story early there until Anthony Grant broke a long run, which was questionable because he appeared like he was touched in the backfield. So it was just a hard thing to watch. And I'll throw this out to you guys. It sounds like it was an amazing weekend. Obviously, you guys had a great time. You met a lot of former Huskers. Maybe you ran into some recruits, families, all this type of stuff. You tailgated. You had a great time. The spring game is so much more than about football at this point, and it's a recruiting tool, which is fine. But at some point you have to kind of decide if you're actually having a spring practice or not, right? There literally feels like they only get 15 of these, and they're literally throwing the 15th away because it doesn't really seem like they get barely anything out of it from a football X's and O standpoint. Would they be better off just rebranding this as the spring football celebration and do everything else and not even, play the game and just actually use it for a real scrimmage some other time?
I like the idea in some ways. I like the idea of it just being. You think of like what they used to do with the freshman team on Fridays during the season when you used to have a freshman team, and there would be a game that they would play or a JV kind of thing. The backups, and they'd play real football. I think there could be some value in that. It was fun watching Harburg in the second half playing real football as a quarterback and not having a green jersey on. And I can see maybe some way of doing that. I think they get 3 scrimmages. Don't quote me on that, but I thought I read that they get like 3 scrimmages over the course of a spring season. And so this would have been one of those 3. And to your point there, Dave, you're not getting a whole lot out of certainly, the starters. Thompson, I guess they had 14 practices where I'm sure they were able to do some things and figure out some things with some of the players. But at the end of the day, Purdy didn't play half the scrimmage or half the spring. So, is he getting pushed by Purdy? You do have Smothers, at least, that was trying to, push Thompson. But, you want your quarterback to be tested. I want Thompson to have earned the position. And I think he's probably our best quarterback. But, anyone that has questions of how earned it was, I get it. I understand it. So, it's a tough thing right now. One thing I guess I am confused with is that we have the largest roster, of anybody in the Big Ten. We're at 150 and yet, we find ourselves kind of shorthanded when we get to the spring game. Now, I think it was at some very specific positions we were like tight end. And that's why Frost said it was kind of hard to go offense or 2 different teams. They just went offense versus defense, period, because they had some positions that were down. But yeah, I get your point. It wasn't, at the very least, it wasn't a football game, not like it used to be with spring game. That's for sure.
Yeah. I just feel like there's a lack of entertainment at some point. There's a balance there. They can turn this into a big deal because they got 55,000 people to show up, but that's not even close to our record, right? And so after a 3-9 season, and so but if you're not providing them actual entertainment with the actual game, you have to make up for it in other ways, right? Because you're counting on that to be a recruiting tool. But if you see us at 45,000 next year and down to 35,000, because it's just like, I'm just not worth going to watch that because it's not entertaining any longer. There has to be a balance at some point.
I mean, honestly, David, watching the game, the first series, and you watched it, it felt like almost like they pulled Thompson aside and said, look, go out there, do what you can, don't get hurt. And and even with like the penalties in the beginning of it like that kind of set them back. Then there was one where they called a sack and it didn't even look like his jersey was touched, let alone like he would have been tackled. Right. And I don't know. It felt like the third game of an NFL preseason where they go in for one series and or if they're even playing at all, and the starters sit the rest of the time, because most of the time out, it was like the second team offensive line. It was the second team, quarterback, wide receiver. Like, it just did not feel in any way like they were trying to show their hand. And I mean, I don't know how else to put it. It was still fun to be there and be around other Husker fans and just, kind of taking in that energy. And, the most complaining I saw was on Twitter. I didn't really see a ton of complaining from people that were there, because it was the environment itself. And especially after what we've been through the last couple of years. Right. I mean, it was seriously some of the most fun that I've had in over 2 years. And
but I would say, so to Rob, just to kind of add to that a little bit, maybe I'll direct this one to Boomer, is that, I mean, I think what compounds this is the fact that the media doesn't get to see a lot of practice either. In fact, almost zero practice, as we've heard from Sipple and others. And so, I mean, like, the real information of like how well this team is doing, it's a big mystery to everyone, right? I mean, we can be optimistic. That's great. It's off season, right? But literally, we just don't know, because we really haven't seen anything, right? And so the spring game always holds this hope out that you can at least see a little bit, that maybe like, oh, all right, yeah, Trey Palmer is that fast or whatever, right? And it just, when there's no real football being played the spring game and the media has no access, the entire Husker Nation is living in this unknown world, right? It's really frustrating, in my opinion.
Yeah, and that's a good point, Dave. And you brought up a lot of, questions I had with it too. The game itself wasn't super compelling, like you said, and we're not really learning anything. But you'd also hit the point how important this is for recruiting, and I think that probably is something we need to look at going forward with this whole spring game. It probably needs to grow and become something than just this kind of scrimmage that we throw out there, which isn't really a true scrimmage. I think back to, decades ago, Nebraska used to kind of do like an entire sports weekend sort of thing the same day, where there'd be volleyball going on, and you could have, the track would be doing, track team would be doing tryouts at the same time. Maybe that's the sort of thing Nebraska could look at doing here. How many different kind of sporting events can we have going on this day? You'd have baseball playing, later in the day. That's great. What other things can we work in? Give fans, a chance to kind of maybe roam around campus to different sporting kind of events that are going on at one time, whether it's a practice or a scrimmage or a meet and greet, with all sorts of different teams and players.
Volleyball.
Yeah, I think the season goes through March, but you could kick that off. Yeah, bowling, is going right now. You could have something with them going on. And maybe instead of, a scrimmage, you have some sort of like, skills thing with the players that fans could watch and do
that's
things
interesting.
like that. Yeah, I'm just throwing ideas out there that, keeps people coming here. Gets everyone excited, gives the recruits a whole lot to see, and just how much, fan support it has. Just, trying to think outside the box a little for this.
That weekend, there was soccer that night, Hibner Park, obviously the Rutgers home series for baseball. There was other sports going on. So that is part of it. Really is about the experience, about the celebration. I wrote down a couple of notes that I had was, it was a chance for me to take Alex to a game, which is a lot easier to do at a spring game than during a regular season game. And I think it was really had that family experience, which is something we're talking about during football season when you are talking about alcohol. And that can be frustrating to some fans to hear that there could be alcohol going into the stadium. Well, you have spring game as kind of an opportunity there is more of a family atmosphere there. It's more of a celebration that way. And it was inexpensive compared to a regular game. And also, I'd say the tailgating, those are all things that can bring people out there. Now, that's not talking about what's going on the field. That's going about the experience. Now, as far as the mystery, And I can understand, I get the media if they would be frustrated that they didn't get to see much. That game was never about showing anything. There was I can promise you, whether we could have had red jerseys on the quarterbacks, and that wouldn't have mattered from an X's and O standpoint. They weren't going to give anything to Northwestern, and that was the smart thing to do. And I don't blame them one bit for that. But the mystery will remain. The other thing
Honky,
is, well, the one last thing is the recruiting piece, and it is hard to get kids here sometimes during football season, especially if we're playing early games. And we have 2 flights in and out of Lincoln now, basically to Chicago and Denver. That's it. And this is an opportunity that's you capitalize on it. That you bring in 40 recruits like they did, transfer portal guys and JUCO guys and freshmen and sophomores and everything in high school, and you get them to Lincoln, Nebraska when it's easy to do so.
Yeah, I mean, I heard it was 100 recruits were in.
There was.
Oh, I mean, it was insane. It was a huge number.
Yeah.
It was kind of cool to see the stuff that they had set up for the kids too. On our tour when they showed us in Hawks Field, I think, right? They had like all these tables set up in this big video screen, and they were showing them stuff of what like the athletic facilities were going to be like. We talked a little bit about it last night with Greg Smith, but it was really cool to kind of just see how they're presenting that. And they like set up these big Barca loungers like in front of the screen for the kids to sit in and watch this video and everything. And, they had all kinds of cool stuff going on for those recruits. So.
And Rob, short of a guy like O'Shawn Mathis, or a transfer portal guy who's actually going to play in 2022, every recruit they had there pretty much is going to be able to experience those facilities almost from day one. I mean, we're now recruiting that far out. So those facilities, I mean, they're going up fast, and they're going to be ready by about the time that these guys are getting here. So,
yeah. So Honky, maybe entertain me for a second here.
Sure.
You mentioned that they ran pretty vanilla offense. Frost said so, obviously, and that was the best thing to do, you said. But I know that you probably would agree with me that, I mean, Tom Osborne just kind of ran the offense probably back in the day during this. Now, it wasn't on TV, but I mean, anybody could have came in and watched and paid attention to how the offense operated. And he wasn't too concerned about Northwestern or Kansas State, figuring out his system. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, I don't think Osborne ever was concerned about anyone knowing their system. I mean, Brendan Stein and Zach Weger used to tell players where they were running the ball.
Yeah. So I'm just like,
this is a different thing. Tom Osborne, the last I knew, he never had 4 new offensive coaches changing, and changing offenses and changing all that. So, that's the unique thing, I guess, about this spring, which would be different from a spring ago or 2 springs ago. I think it's fair what you're saying about the future, though, because as I recall last year, I mean, there was a lot of thud going on in that spring game too. And I don't remember as much of a negative, from the Twitter sphere, at least. This was pretty much how I thought it kind of ran last year. So I don't know what the future of it is. I like seeing real football. Trust me. And if they just want to say, look, we're just going to sit out our top 40 guys because we've seen everything we need out of them and we don't want them to get injured. Treat it like an NFL. Yeah, exactly. Treat it like an NFL preseason game in that sense, Rob. We're sitting all of them. And then literally, since we have 150 guys or, however many it is in spring, I guess it wouldn't probably be the full 150. But, if you have 110 guys, then you still would have maybe 60 or 70 that you could play a real game with. And you go from there.
And I think the most interesting thing and the most telling thing about all this and like, well, how are the fans going to feel about this and everything? Honky, how many people were there when that game ended in the fourth quarter? Well over half. Still,
yeah, I mean, it's
the people there, right? Like people stayed till the end. It wasn't like people were like, "Oh, this is boring. I'm going to go," And it was definitely, people were there, and like I said, people were just there. We liked it. We were spending time together, watching the product, whatever it was on the field. Even at the end, it got a little bit exciting because the offense started to come back against the defense. They did have a graphic off in the corner showing like how the different teams scored that they displayed pretty much the entire game. I think it was over there in the what is that, like the northwest corner, maybe the northeast corner. They had we were in the west side, so it was on the Northeast side, they had like on the screen how they were scoring their points and everything the whole time. So you could keep up with it if you were watching that a little bit. But it was, if I was a recruit and I saw that and I saw what was going on, I got a tour of the facilities to see like what the athletic facilities were going to look like and got to walk around campus, where the weather was warm, but it was just a little windy, whatever. I mean, it would leave a good impression on me. I mean, it did leave a good impression on me because I did feel like we were being recruited at one point.
Especially a negative 2-star recruit like Rob.
Yeah, that's -4.
I do think, to Dave's point, the truth or the proof in the pudding will be, I guess we'll see in a year from now at the next one, right? I mean, if the number starts going down, like he said, then you would probably need to reevaluate things. We'll see. I think the 55,000 that were there, for the most part, the ones that we spoke with, at least, they seem to be people that would come back again. And, it was a fun weekend, at least at that. As far as on the field, for what it's worth, and we're still talking about scoring explosion, so we're on the offensive side. I'll tell you what, I think Rob talked to a good guy back in February in Kevin Williams. He is a guy that if somebody showed well, and he got to play quite a bit in that second half when there was real football being played, I think Kevin Williams showed well. And I don't know if he's done enough right now to win over one of those starting positions, but I think at the very least he's going to be a swing guard, maybe the sixth guy on the line, or he's at least worked his way into the conversation of starting. And that says a lot. Now that line, without Prohaska, and Dave, did you hear that? I said it right. Without that and Corcoran, look, those are going to be two guys that are going to be playing a huge role. I imagine we're going to hit the portal for probably one more offensive lineman, you think? I mean, definitely a tackle body in there. I really want to closely rewatch the game and watch Ben Hart, because he is there's still the ability in him, and he was a top 100 recruit and everything, and he has the body. I mean, he could be a guy that can be a difference maker, but if he's not, then you've got to start planning around that, and that changes up. Do you move Corcoran out there, or has Hickson done enough at center? Can Corcoran play center? Who knows? I mean, they've got some mixing and matching to do on the O line, but that's going to be the key. That's the key area right now. I'm not worried about the specialist players, across the board. It's the O line for me.
Yeah. Well, speaking of specialists, Boomer, did you see any punts that got you excited?
Well, the first punt that was a nice, 60-yard kick, and I think that was one of the loudest cheers I heard on the TV.
That was actually the loudest cheer of the day, was that right there. Even I cheered.
That was pretty exciting. I mean, as far as the rest of the punts went, they weren't quite as exciting. I mean, there were a couple, that were inside the 20, and I think he did average about 40 yards a punt, which is, super stellar. And then as far as the rest of the kicking went, we missed a field goal. I think we went, 1 of 2 for field goal kicking, and there was a really badly shanked extra point at one point. But again, it's spring game. I don't know how the wind is working, and how windy was it in person?
It was
there?
pretty. It was pretty
bad.
Windy.
Okay.
Yeah, it was windy all weekend, and on down closer you got to the field, the windier it was.
Yeah, and it's also, again, I don't know what it's going to be when you put it in the live situation. You have people, actually running, trying to block these kicks. That could change a few things too. And it's a lot of work getting your timing down from the snapper, the holder, the punter, the kicker. There's a lot of things they still have to work on. So
we don't even have
we'll
that
see
kicker.
improvement on that.
We don't even have the kicker that we recruited or transferred or whatnot, even on campus yet, right?
He's not here. We do have at least our kickoff, our Frank. We have our kickoff specialist there. Speaking of punter, while we're talking about that, I did read this tweet today, and it was punter Tory Taylor told Spencer Petras this spring that it looks like there will be fewer punts this year by the way the offense is looking. So over there in Iowa, they're thinking pretty good about the offense, and they're not going to be punting as much. But,
well, I mean, like 13 punts a game is still fewer punts for Iowa the way they play, isn't it? I mean,
Kirk is punting on third down just because.
On the opponent's 45.
So we touched on the recruits a little bit, and before we turn to defense, I do want to talk to probably the highest profile offensive recruit. Dylan Raiola was in town again. I believe this is at least the third time he's visited. This is the son of Dominic Raiola and nephew of Donovan, our new offensive line coach, and kind of newly minted #1 recruiting recruit of the 2023. Is that right? Or 24? I'm forgetting.
24.
24, I think.
24
Yeah.
class.
Yeah.
So still 2 years away. He's only going into his junior year, but very highly regarded, and seems like he had a good time, right?
Yeah, he was there alongside our other quarterback, William Watson, Pops. He was there as well, and he's the 2023 quarterback in this class. One thing that Greg Smith mentioned to us last night, and that right now we're looking at a slide of the 2023 recruiting class. Of course, we have our in-state recruiting class one. I still haven't updated this slide, but we have 5 on this slide, 2023. We have 5 players from in-state that have offers. Well, now that can be 6 because Brock Knudsen, the offensive tackle, 6'7", 283 from Scotts Bluff, he did get an offer from Nebraska over the weekend and was in town over the weekend too. So that gets us up to 6. And Malachi Coleman, he wasn't at the game, but there's still a lot of positive feelings that that Nebraska is high on his list. But boy, he's got quite the list now too. So I mean, it's a big list,
Yeah.
and we're hoping to get every one of those in-state kids that we've offered.
Yeah. So Malachi Coleman's got the kind of blue blood list of recruiting, right?
Mhm.
At Georgia, Alabama, pretty much everyone.
Oregon, yeah, you name it. It was
Yeah,
has them
it's
all.
impressive. It's impressive.